So, when you're ready, Sue, I'm all ears. Go for it.
Great. Now, for you to understand how I became the woman I became, I want to start by telling you about my parents. My dad was born in Bratislava to a middle-class family, and my mom in Vienna, also middle class. My dad became a journalist in Prague, and my mom a dental assistant. And that's where they met. They met in Prague, and it was love at first sight. And it was a love that was true and lasted for 50 years. They had to get married 4 months after they met because the war exploded in Europe. And in order to flee together, they had to be married. And they chose Bolivia and hid in the jungles of Bolivia to see how the war was going to pan out. They lived amongst the indigenous population and other immigrants. And my dad discovered that he had a flair for all things electrical and worked for the state oil company of Bolivia, and looked after the electrical needs of the corporation and the village. And my mom, who had never cooked in her life, cooked for the men. When the work dried up, they would go from village to village doing whatever was necessary to survive, and waited to see how the war was going to pan out. And when they did, they decided to go to Argentina because Argentina prided themselves in being a neutral country. Now, that neutrality was a double-edged sword because the Jews and the Nazis fled to Argentina. My parents were forced to live in an Italian neighborhood because it was cheap, but they resented bitterly having to bring up a child in a neighborhood which was uncouth, uneducated, uncivilized, the plebs, and definitely not people like us. That meant I was forbidden to play with the children in case I became contaminated. But that wasn't it, or not in itself. At school, my parents also forbade me to play with the Jewish children because it was too risky to be seen associating with them. And of course, you couldn't play with children of Nazi parents because surely their values and beliefs would have rubbed off on the children. It wasn't true, it never happened. But I never played with the children. In fact, I was a bit of an outcast, only because I was the only child with curly red freckles. And so I was teased and left out. I was very unhappy and very, very lonely. And I had no sense of identity, no sense of confidence or social skills. At home, my dad insisted I had to follow his advice at all times because of his greater life experience. But they also wanted me to be comfortable and not put myself out too much. And so they did things that by rights I should have done. For example, when I was 17, I was going out with a young man, and then I decided I didn't want to go out with him anymore. But breaking up was messy, so I asked my dad to do it, and he did. So is it any surprise? No sense of responsibility or for standing up for what's right or anything of the sort. When I arrived in England on the 13th of July, 1965, I was a very attractive young woman, but riddled with self-doubt about my own attractiveness and lovability. 2 months later, I went to a concert, and I arrived early because I wanted to get a good seat. As it turned out, the whole room was completely empty, except for one man sitting right bang in the middle of the room. I took a look at him. I liked what I saw. He had the cutest dimples. So I plonked myself right next to him. Can you imagine all the social taboos I was breaking? I had no idea. I'd only just arrived from Argentina. Anyway, he looked a bit startled, and I engaged him in conversation. He didn't say much, but I spoke enough for the two of us. But one thing I didn't like about him, his hair, I deemed it to be too long. It went all the way to the top of his shirt collar. And so I decided that if I got to know him any better, I would make sure he got his hair cut. Sounds funny, sounds hilarious. Yes, maybe. But actually, that was from the very beginning, I judged him to be not good enough and decided to change him. Something that I carried on. But I also decided I wanted to see if I could make him fall in love with me, because I wanted to prove to myself that I was attractive and lovable. Unfortunately, I succeeded. I followed all the tricks of the trade that young women use, from reading women's magazines about how to get your man, and he didn't stand a chance. Now, Jim was 10 years older than me. He was 30, and he had actually never had a relationship. He wasn't gay, he just wasn't interested. There are people like that that are just loners by nature and happy to be like that. But when I barged into his life, he just never stood a chance. So we got married 4 months after we met. I wanted a marriage like my parents had because they adored each other. What I got was exactly the opposite. I felt unloved, I felt lonely, I felt taken for granted, unimportant, sometimes invisible, and intensely lonely, intensely lonely. In the beginning, I blamed him for my unhappiness. I blamed him for everything he said or did and for everything he didn't say or do. But none of it made any difference. And so I went into denial. And denial looked like, oh, it's not so bad. He loves me really. Oh, I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. Doesn't really matter. Other people's relationships are so much worse. And it worked at one level, but my body knew better. And so I developed all kinds of health conditions, quite severe. I got intense pains that came and went and appeared to have no connection with anything. The worst was one in my leg where the pain was so intense that I ended up walking on crutches for the best part of a year. I had various episodes of clinical depression, and I was given the Valium, the miracle drug at the time. But the real miracle was that I didn't become addicted. And I also developed the most potentially dangerous condition of all, bulimia, the eating disorder. And all I know is that the only reason I'm standing before you today is because I didn't want to die. I was 54 years old when I met a man called Alan. And Alan became my life coach for a very long time. I stayed with him for many years not because I became dependent on him, but because there were always a new mountain to climb. I learned something new. I reached the top of that mountain, and there was another one to be climbed. And nothing changed. I still keep climbing mountains because they're there and because I have to. I think we're all in the process of becoming, and that's how I feel. I keep on learning. Eventually, still working with Alan, I found the courage to leave my marriage. I was 60 at the time. A couple of years after I left, and still with his help, I had the most painful insight, which was I wasn't the innocent bystander that I like to believe I was. I like to believe that my unhappiness and the breakdown of my marriage was all Jim's fault. What I discovered very painfully was I too played an important role in my own unhappiness and in the breakdown of a marriage. Luckily enough, Jim was still alive at the time. I wrote him a letter and I asked him to forgive me, because he died in 1988. No, he died much later. But anyway, the point is, I had a chance to ask him to forgive me, and he did. And I think it healed us both. Over the next 10 years, I wrote my autobiography, Dancing with a Mask, Learning to Love and Be Loved. And it describes step by step my journey to freedom, essentially. The book ends when I turned 60, totally empowered and believing I finally understood the meaning of life, the universe, and everything. And I did to a large extent. I started my coaching practice. I decided to become a coach because I experienced firsthand the transformative effect of coaching. And I wanted to give back. I wanted to make a difference. I started attracting the most wonderful friendships, and many of them are still with me today. And I went on adventures. Enter my, have you got it? Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, Sue. Linda's going to put the, oh, your adventure, your paragliding. No, I haven't.
Yes.
Sorry. No,
Oh,
I
never
haven't. I
mind.
didn't get around to doing it. Beg your pardon.
Not
I
to
was
worry,
miles
not to
away
worry.
there.
But of all the adventures that I went on, the one that I went on in November 2015 was the most amazing one of all. It was a holiday in Turkey, paragliding. Can you imagine me, 70, paragliding, soaring in the air? It was the most joyful experience ever. It was just amazing. I thought I had it all. Wonderful friendships, work I was passionate about, going on adventures. I had it all. I was happy, I was fulfilled. And then 2 weeks later, after I got back, I met a man. I was 70, he was 70, and he turned out to be my soulmate, my lover, my friend, and now my husband. And so one of the things that I did throughout those 10 years before we met was I started to blog. And I started blogging about my grieving and healing, about the mistakes I made in my marriage, about the things that I was learning. I wrote about the stupidity of making choices without even knowing who you are. And I felt I had to share what I was learning, because otherwise, what's the point if I hold all everything I'm learning without sharing it? It gives my suffering meaning. When I finally met the love of my life, it was so easy. It was so easy. And I was amazed. I couldn't understand why it was so easy. So I did research, as I tend to do, and I discovered that there were two reasons why it was so easy. The first reason was that over those 10 years, I got to know myself really well, so that when a man turned up, whether I wanted to or not, I would know whether he was the right one for me. That was reason number one. The second one was that without realizing it, both of us were doing all the right things. And all the right things, I found out through my research, are the kind of behaviors and mindset that lead to a strong and happy relationship. And the other book that I wrote that put it all together, all my mistakes and all my learnings that I use in my marriage, in my counseling, in my blogging, in my talks, are summarized in this book. Open Your Heart, The 7 Secrets of Strong and Loving Relationships, available on Amazon. And I think there is a link that Linda is going to put up, that if you want to, you can get hold of it.
Yeah, just search. You can search for it, obviously, through Sue Plumtree. But I think Linda's going to post a little link in case anybody's interested in getting hold of that. Have read that book; it's gorgeous. You'll enjoy that.
And now we are living in most unusual times. We're living in COVID times. And what does it mean for relationships? People are stuck with each other, whether they want to or not. Some people are living the nightmare of having to be together with someone they hate. And I can't think of anything worse than that. Other people are having a challenge. For some of them, the problems were accumulating over the years before the lockdown, but the lockdown is amplifying that. And so this is an opportunity for many people to see if they can heal their relationship. Because now there's nowhere to rush. This is a time to reflect, to figure out why things have gone wrong. And so what I would like to share with you are some of the things that I learned along the way. And following on the point that I made is that one of the things that if you want to change your relationship, if there is anything that makes you unhappy in your relationship and you want to change it, then you are the one that has to take that first step. Because most people wait for the other person to change, and it's not going to happen. The consequence of that is that if you don't know what you are doing that damages your relationship, you will continue to do more of the same simply because you don't know what else to do. So this is an opportunity to find out how you can make a difference, because following on from that, the other thing that I learned is it takes two to tango. It takes two people to build a relationship. And that is a really important point, because that brings me to the next point about how to change another person. You can change another person, and there are two ways to do that. The first one is if they are willing and able to change. But the second way to change it is if you engage with them in a different way. But first you have to know what that different way is. And so to know that, you have to know yourself. So it's really the question of the chicken and the egg. You have to change yourself first before anything can change. And the final point from this short list is that what creates long and lasting relationships is not love, it's friendship. And that is borne out from research into couples that have been together for 40, 50, even 60 years. It is friendship that keeps you together. And so the other thing that you need to learn, if you don't already know, is what exactly do you need to build friendship in your marriage? So there is so much to discover about relationships, which is, I think, is absolutely awesome. Okay, I think I've spoken long enough, and I would like you to do something, a little exercise, and it's about COVID. We are now stuck in a situation not of our making. Life has slowed down. We have stopped running. There is so much time to reflect and to learn if we allow it. So I would like you to do two lists. The first list is write down everything that used to be really important to you before the lockdown.
Yeah, all right.
A minute would be kind of nice. Is there anybody timing it? It's just a minute.
Right. Oh, hang on. Sue, would you like me to put people into breakout rooms so they can discuss it with other people?
It would be great if you did.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
So if everyone's got the idea of the question, what was the question again, Sue, just to remind everybody?
What a list as many reasons as possible that you found really important before the lockdown.
Right. So things about your relationship specifically.
About anything in your life.
About anything in your life. Let's have a list of things that were really important to you before lockdown. What was the sort of...
Could be having your latte on your way to work.
Okay.
Imagine living without it. But there will be other things.
Okay, let's, we're going to put three in a group. Let's see if that works. Yeah, let's do 3 in a group. Oh, hang on, that's how many rooms. Yeah, automatically. Now, hang on. Getting this right. Be with you in a minute. There we go. And we'll give you a timing when we'll give you 5 minutes in the room. You've got 3 of you, and have a go at that list.
Another question: do we have the time? Because what I would like to do is to have then a second list and then share.
Okay. Well, what's the second list as well? Maybe they could do that at the same time.
I would then like, once you have a list of all the things that mattered to you before the lockdown, and then cross off the things that you don't regard as important anymore. And the second list is to write down everything that you learned matters to you since the lockdown.
Okay. That's going to be a lot of conversation. Okay, I will see you back here in 5 minutes, guys.
Okay.
Thanks.
In that case, I have 2 seconds and I will come back.
Okay.
I'm unmuting myself. I hope that's okay.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure how this is working. Who am I speaking with?
I'm just going to get rid of this. I think you've got me. Lucky you, Yvonne.
Okay.
Right. Hang on, I'm just going to stop the recording.
Just the 2 of us?
Hang on a minute.